As popular as Bloodborne is, it's kind of difficult to describe to someone who isn't already familiar with From Software's Souls series what makes Bloodborne so engaging. At face value, it is just a third-person action game where you kill monsters. Obviously, this would be massively underselling the game. To me, the uniqueness of Bloodborne is how almost every aspect has a unique feel, which is something that's a bit harder to sell to a person who isn't sitting in front of the game with a controller in their hand. This is particularly true when trying to translate the feeling of weight to combat and the intense catharsis of swinging your hunter's axe into the face of an imposing monstrosity, or the moments of micro-relief when you barely dodge a boss attack that you were certain was going to hit. There is also the elation from defeating a difficult boss, and those moments required afterwards for your heart to return to its normal beat. Then there's the constant unease that gnaws at the brain, generated by the looming and complex architecture and the horrific enemy design. Enemies are designed with a subtle wrongness that plays on a psychological fear. Some monsters are simply dangerous looking beasts with claws and fangs, while others will have parasitic features or a diseased appearance that'll make your skin crawl. There isn't any explicit or understandable goal or driving force that pushed me forward either, more of a morbid curiosity to see how disturbing this world would become. At this stage, it is generally agreed by those who've played it and critics that Bloodborne is a great game. I feel no need to add another pair of lips to its ass. All I can say is that Bloodborne is one of those rare games that I played through twice, as in I immediately started again after completing for the first time. I really wanted to keep on playing the game. Well, mostly. Loading times were terrible at launch, but were patched to the point of just being bad. I generally find loading times to be an accepted evil and aren't usually a problem depending on how they're implemented. I find the key is to keep the waiting time minor relative to the playtime. If I've died after battling for 20 minutes, then a 30 to 40 second loading time isn't going to bother me. What's frustrating about Bloodborne's loading times is that the waiting time can be 30 to 40 seconds regardless of how much distance you've covered or how much of the level was progressed. I realise it's my own fault for dying 3 yards from a lantern, mere 10 seconds after I've spawned, but I haven't the slightest idea why it still takes 30 seconds to load me back into the world. I have a suspicion that the game is dumping everything from memory and reloading the entire area, objects and enemies, regardless of any of those things being changed. If no enemies have been killed or scenery disrupted, then surely it would have been quicker to just reset the player and enemy positions. I think this is what annoyed me most of all. If I die far away from a lamppost after killing many things and destroying the scenery, then I could understand additional time to reset all these assets. But dying quickly after spawning, which will happen, then having to wait another minute to get back to the exact spot is infuriating. I have no inside information on the game's design and could be completely wrong about how the game is loading, but the general feeling is still the same. It feels as if my time is being wasted. This became considerably aggravating when trying to kill a boss, where making a reattempt usually involves a long trek back to the encounter zone. Speaking of which... Now, I appreciate to a point not having a lantern directly before a boss. From Software seem to have the philosophy that carelessness will get you killed. So when dying to a boss, it's understandable that they would set you back a bit and have you deal with some lesser obstacles. This also gives you time to refocus. Trying to brute force your way back to an encounter will definitely get you killed, as you will be experiencing Bloodborne's equivalent of being on tilt. However, on some bosses, returning to the encounter zone was so obtuse that I wanted to stop playing. The sheer travel fatigue when remembering the extent of the trek after dying to a boss caused me on occasion to just quit for the day. I consider this a very serious criticism because one of From Software's skills is to beat you and beat you, but you still want to keep coming back. The one Reborn, for example, required about 2 minutes to get back to its encounter zone, and that's if you used a semi-hidden shortcut. The boss at Canehurst required you to run through a room full of irritatingly shrieky ghosts and slowly climb a ladder while being unavoidably shot. It just seems pointless, and that's not the usual vibe I get from Bloodborne. Every death generally teaches you something or informs you, but there is nothing to gain from having these boring and, if getting hit by an enemy, frustrating jogs. Especially when there are enemies that are in your way and have to be killed. Generally, I won't risk collecting blood echoes because I know it's likely I'm going to again die to the boss. So having to potentially pointlessly kill these enemies just feels like the game is disrespecting my time. This may sound like a silly thing to say given how From Software and the Soul series in general goes about telling its stories, but I felt that at some points things were a bit too obscure. I realise this is more of a personal thing, but I imagine other players would have had a similar experience in that the first time around I would play the game kind of naturally, just as I came across things, and then on New Game Plus One I would go about completing the stuff I missed the first time around. It is a bit ridiculous how Bloodborne obscures this potential content. For example, the first time you encounter Eileen the Crow, she is hidden behind barrels and blends completely into the background and very easy to miss. There is also the third ending that requires the use of 3 umbilical cords, and 2 of which are obtained through optional content and very easy to mess up. If you kill Yusefka too early or send Ariana to the wrong place, then you've blocked off the option for the rest of the game and may never know it. I realise that there's a kind of community expectation with From Software's games, and a lot of it is based on shared knowledge, but from the way I play games I really rather not have to depend on another person's experiences to get everything out of a game. I also don't want to have to search every nook and cranny of a room just in case I've missed something. Now, I realise this is me kind of wanting my cake and eating it, but a little less hidden might have been preferable. Something that I could more likely stumble upon myself as opposed to having to search specifics online. There is also another problem with this kind of obscure optional content in that any time I went to find out about how to open it up, it inherently spoiled it. This would be, for example, the Queen at Canehurst and what happens to Ariana when you find the third umbilical cord from her. This is stuff that was not a surprise to me when I actually played it, because finding out how to get there basically told me what was going to happen. I'm not quite sure how this issue could be solved, or in other words, what would make me happy, because all this obscured content really gives the world a very rich, wonderful feeling that there's always something there to surprise you, but on the other hand, finding out about this stuff ruins the surprise in itself. Having to fight the game for control over the camera can be very frustrating, and it's even more so in Bloodborne when you're also trying to fight a colossal electrified wolf demon. There are plenty of enormous and very fast bosses in Bloodborne, and trying to keep locked on while they dart from one side of the arena to another can be very difficult. This is especially tricky because you can't look directly up. As a result, I had to switch from free moving mode to lock-on mode during the fight, which is very disruptive, especially when you're already in a terror-induced panic. So, that's my nag list for Bloodborne, a game I very much enjoyed and I'm looking forward to any future releases. Now, I do realise there is an expansion due and that Dark Souls 3 will be coming out next year as well. These could very well have addressed everything I said here, making this video completely pointless. All the same, I enjoy getting it off my chest, so I will leave you with the knowledge that I actually have no knowledge if any of this is going to be corrected. Bye!